Alright there guys, and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be talking about a game. We haven't done this since we covered the Spyro trilogy last year. Today we're going to be covering the direct sequel to Far Cry 5. That of course being Far Cry New Dawn, which came out back in 2019, 5 years ago. And I only just picked it up a couple of months ago. So if you guys were around the channel as far back as 2018, you might remember I did a Let's Play on Far Cry 5, which Chase starred in half of the episodes of that series. And then at the end of 2018, I made a video about Far Cry 5 being my game of the year for 2018. So I was very excited when a direct sequel for the game was announced. But I just never played it until now. So, Far Cry New Dawn takes place many years after Far Cry 5 and the bombs that went off right at the end of Far Cry 5. So Hope County looks a lot different to what it used to. But the game doesn't even start in Hope County. You're actually infiltrating an enemy stronghold to break out a man by the name of Thomas Rush, who is helping you against the new enemies of the game, the Highwaymen, which are led by these two twin sisters, Mickey and Lou, who you see a couple times throughout the game. They've basically mostly have control over Hope County, and you're here to stop them. So when your train gets derailed and the original plan for the mission goes south, you have to escape, and you run into this woman called Carmina, and she takes you back to Hope County. She is the daughter of Nick and Kim Rye from Far Cry 5. You might remember there's a side mission in Far Cry 5 where you have to drive Nick and Kim Rye to the midwife's house as she's about to give birth. The baby she gives birth to and then comes out with in that cutscene is Carmina. And that's straight off one of the things I actually really like about this game. How Nick and Kim Rye especially, are way more important characters in this game than they were in Far Cry 5. They were cool in Far Cry 5, but they're much more important characters this time around, which I quite like. And Carmina is also one of your Guns for Hire characters you can have in this game. The Guns for Hire system from Far Cry 5 completely carries over to this game. It's pretty much the same. Some of these characters you get through story missions, and some of them you get through side missions. And these lot are actually quite helpful when it comes to liberating outposts, because of course, just like in every Far Cry game, liberating outposts is a very common thing. So the game says it has 30 outposts, but it doesn't. It has 10, but you can do those 10 outposts 3 times each time being harder than the previous. And with Far Cry New Dawn being a post-apocalyptic version of Hope County, money is no longer a thing. The currency in this game is not money like it was in Far Cry 5, it's materials like copper, titanium, carbon fiber, ethanol, stuff like that. And ethanol is acquired through doing those is from liberating outposts, which you can use to upgrade Prosperity, which is your home base, at the very bottom corner of the map. You can use it to upgrade things like your health, you can use it to upgrade weapons, vehicles, healing. Because Far Cry New Dawn... Sorry about that. Far Cry New Dawn has a system of 4 different tiers for its weapons and vehicles and enemies and pretty much everything. It has grey tier, which is the first and weakest tier of enemies, weapons and vehicles. Then it has blue tier, which is the second one, purple tier, which is the third, and gold tier, which is the fourth and the strongest. You will need more materials for the higher tier weapons and vehicles. Because if you're using a blue tier weapon against a purple tier enemy, you're not going to do much damage to them. You need to have a weapon of the same or higher tier power to take down enemies of that tier. It's an interesting way of making enemies stronger or weaker depending on what you have. And unlike in Far Cry 5, where you can add attachments to your weapons, in New Dawn, you can't do that. Instead, you just buy a weapon, you craft a weapon with the materials you've acquired, and depending on the higher tier of weapon you craft, it will have a certain amount of attachments on it straight away. Whether it could be a red dot sight, it could be a scope, it could be a silencer, it could be a bayonet. There's quite a few things. So, the highwaymen are the ones in charge. And bit by bit, through the story, you're giving hope to Prosperity that they can take out the highwaymen and get back to somewhat peaceful lives after, of course, what happened at the end of Far Cry 5. The perk system is back, just like it is in every Far Cry game, and the perks in this game are basically exactly the same as the ones from Far Cry 5. You've got the sabotage ones where you can sabotage vehicles and make them explode. The grappling hook, one of my all-time favourite perks. You've got you can upgrade your amount of medkits you can hold. You can upgrade your lung capacity, your fist damage, extra weapon slots. All of that stuff from the previous game is back. But the game actually adds 5 brand new perks when you get closer to the end of the story. Because the highwaymen realise you're actually making a dent in their plans. So they literally turn up at Prosperity and threaten you, and even then send a bunch of highwaymen soldiers to take you down in Prosperity. So you have to defend Prosperity and take the highway soldiers out. One of the missions is actually rescuing Nick Rye from being because he was captured by the highwaymen. So you go and rescue him, and you have a really wholesome reunion between him, Kim Rye, and Carmina. Speaking of Carmina, her as a gun for hire, all of the guns for hire have different attributes. They also have different weapons. The only returning guns for hire character from Far Cry 5 to this game is Hurk. You know, the guy with the rocket launcher. Since we last saw him in Far Cry 5, he's done the deed, if you know what I mean, and actually had a child. How has he convinced anybody to procreate with him? That's beyond me, considering how odd of a character he is. Yeah, all of them have different weapons and different attributes, and the more kill they also get an extra attribute for a certain amount of kills that they get. And when you're liberating the 3-tier difficulty outposts, you need to bring in the guns for hire characters. They are very much necessary, in my opinion, to take down enemies, because they add more alarms, they add higher tier enemies. If they manage to call reinforcements on the alarm, they bring in helicopters, they bring in gold tier enemies, which if you don't have a gold tier weapon, you're gonna struggle taking these guys out. So when you get to a certain point in the story, just after you've fought the Highwaymen away from Prosperity and defended it, everyone realizes that they need extra help. And they dare to think, maybe we should ask Joseph Seed for help. Remember him? The main antagonist of Far Cry 5? Nick and Kim Rai are obviously very much against the idea to begin with, for obvious reasons. They were helping our character in Far Cry 5 fight against him and his Chosen, as they're called. Since your character is not the same one as in Far Cry 5, your character in this game has never met Joseph before, so your character doesn't know what Joseph is like and what he did in the past. We, of course, know what he did, but your character doesn't know. So you head off to New Eden to find Joseph, but he's not there. Instead, you find Ethan, his son, and not his son as in all of his followers are his children, as in this, Ethan is actually his son. Since Joseph has seemingly abandoned his people, Ethan becomes the prophet. He believes himself to be the new prophet, but he can't manage to convince the people to follow him instead of Joseph. Even though Joseph isn't even there, they still follow his ideals instead of Ethan's. So you go even further north of the map. You go to the very, very top of the map, the highest point of the map you can get to, and you meet Joseph. And he shows you this sacred tree. It looks like a cherry blossom tree. That's the best way to describe it. And he gives you a sacred fruit that basically makes you start tripping, like you did whenever you were in the Bliss in Far Cry 5. Where you basically have to fight your inner beast to prove yourself worthy. And basically you just take on this large bear that has these little red weak spots that do a ton of damage if you hit them. But the only weapon you have is a bow and arrow. It's actually quite simple when you understand what you have to do. You have to do that a couple times and then the lights go out, so you then gain flaming arrows that you have to shoot at these four sets of logs to light up the arena again before you can start attacking the bear again. When you get to the final phase, you lose the bow and arrow, but instead you gain super strength. Basically, Aiden's volatile mode from Dying Light 2. That's the best way to describe it. You basically get that where you do tons of damage when you punch. So you take the bear out, and Joseph sees you as the shepherd to lead New Eden forward. Ethan is pissed that Joseph is back because he thought Joseph was dead, or was more like hoping that Joseph was dead, but he wasn't. So you gain help from the Chosen to take on the Highwaymen. And each time you finish a part of the story, because the story has 3 parts, after you finished a certain amount of missions, it goes into an intermission where it shows you something from the past. The first time, it shows Carmina as a child asking Nick and Kim Wright why she needs to stay away from Joseph. She doesn't understand. She doesn't know about all the things that he did to Hope County in Far Cry 5. The second time is Mickey and Lou, our main antagonists of the game, basically leaving their mother to go with their father, and just before leaving, their mom says to Lou, "Don't become like your father." They do it. They literally become exactly like him. And then the third and final intermission is Ethan as a child asking Joseph why he can't have the sacred fruit from the tree, which Joseph calls God's gift. And you find out right at the end of the game just why Joseph wouldn't allow Ethan to have the sacred fruit. So just before we get into the final bosses of the game, let's talk a bit about what the other objectives you can do. So you've got outposts you can liberate up to 3 times, which gains you ethanol, which allows you to upgrade prosperity to get better things. Whether it's vehicles, weapons, more health. Pepper stashes make a return, although in this game they're called treasure hunts, but they're exactly the same. They even have the same icon on the map, and they have the same things. A bunch of loot, and then 3 perk points. And after you've met with Joseph and brought him back to the middle of New Eden, 5 brand new perks become available to use, and one of them is incredible. It's called Leap of Faith, and basically it allows you to, obviously, that's a reference to Assassin's Creed, obviously, with the name, but it basically gives you a double jump. It allows you to double jump, but you don't simply just jump higher, you jump higher and much further. It is such a great perk. And of course, they know how good these perks are. That's why they only allow you to use them so far into the story. But when you've got everything ready and set up, you head off to the middle of New Eden, where you find Mickey and Lou, who last time you saw them was actually at a demolition derby after you killed someone who was supposed to be part of it, and then you drive in his place and win it. But the last time you saw them without a disguise on, they killed Thomas Rush. In cold blood, they just blasted his head in with a shotgun at point blank range. Which was a bit shocking when I first saw it, because I didn't think they'd actually go through with it and do this. But you reach the middle of New Eden and you have to take on Mickey and Lou at the same time as the final bosses of the game. My god, these two are frustrating to fight, because they're gold tier enemies, which of course they are. That makes perfect sense since they're the final bosses. They should be the strongest enemy type in the game. But they're also the strongest enemies in the game. They take such little damage compared to any other enemy in the whole game. Even with a gold tier weapon, of which I had 1 gold tier weapon at the time, I had three purple tier weapons, although one of them I ended up mistakenly getting rid of because I picked up a level 1 tier sniper before making my way to the final boss. But they take such little damage, and they do so much damage, and they throw so much at you. They throw soldiers, choppers, freaking fog mist, so you can't even see where you're going. They're very frustrating final bosses to take on. But when you finally do take them out, Mickey dies in the cutscene, but Lou doesn't, and you have the option to shoot Lou or just leave. It's not like at the end of Far Cry 4 with Pagan Min, where you either can... It's like a very short amount of time you have to decide whether to shoot him or not. It's literally just in normal gameplay where you can either just shoot her with whatever weapon you want or just leave. I chose to leave because I've pumped enough ammo into you. I don't need to pump any more in. So you think, well, that's it then. You've beat the game. But no, because that was mission 21 out of 22. Because the final mission in the game is you head up to Joseph tells you to stop Ethan because Ethan finally eats the sacred fruit from the God's gift tree that Joseph continuously told him not to eat. So you have to chase after him, and you end up in this cave, and Ethan turns into the very same bear that you fought earlier when you were fighting your inner beast. This boss fight is just as annoying as the Mickey and Lou boss fight. Basically, you have to fight Ethan in his bear form, and you have to just shoot his weak spots. He takes damage if you just shoot him at all, but he takes very little damage compared to if you shoot his weak spots. But he does like these slam attacks, and he does so much damage when he hits you. He does like, some attacks do half health, and some attacks pretty much do full health damage that put you down to 1 hit away from death. I ended up wasting all of my pipe bombs, all of my dynamite, all of my Molotovs. I ended up wasting so much equipment. And there are these ammo refill sections at each side of the cave that luckily, if you have the Leap of Faith perk, you can get to them very quickly by doing the double jump. This boss fight would not be possible, in my opinion, without the double jump. It is a lifesaver. It is so helpful. When you finally take Ethan down, which it took me about 4 attempts to do, but then I finally did it. Ethan dies because you had to take him down, and Joseph stands at the sacred tree, realizing that everything he has done death and destruction has followed him wherever he has gone. He is not the shepherd to lead. He is not the true father to lead forward. And he asks you to kill him. So the game tells you to shoot him, so you just shoot him in the chest at point blank range once and he dies. And then Hope County becomes yours. So, now that we've got through the story and some of the other objectives, what did I think about Far Cry New Dawn? One thing I'd have to say is that it's certainly not as good as Far Cry 5. It's definitely not as good. The gameplay is exactly the same, but one thing that really annoyed me about Far Cry New Dawn compared to Far Cry 5 is the traversal of the map, getting around the map. it's so annoying to get around the map. So many objectives are are like thousands of meters away from where you start the mission. And because you can't just get a car like you could in Far Cry 5. You just buy a car and you can set it out. No, you can craft cars with materials, but then you have to go and find a garage somewhere in the world in order to actually drive these cars. So yeah, traversal was definitely one of the most annoying things in the game for me. I really did not like it. I thought the weapon and enemy tiers were definitely interesting way of changing up the types of weapons and enemies you can fight. How you need a certain tier of weapon to easily take down a certain tier of enemy. I'm not a fan of having to just liberate the same 10 outposts 3 times each. I would have much rather there been 30 different outposts, and the further away from prosperity an outpost is, the harder it is to liberate. That would have made a lot more sense to me. But the addition of the new perks was a nice addition, especially the double jump one. That is probably my favourite perk in the game, with the grappling hook coming in right behind it. The story wasn't quite as interesting as Far Cry 5's. You had Joseph, John, Faith, and Jacob. You had all the family, and then the highwaymen. You only see them like 5 times throughout the whole game before you fight them. So yeah, Mickey and Lou are not as interesting villains as what Joseph and his family from the Far Cry 5 were. They weren't the worst villains ever, they just weren't as good as Joseph. I did like how Joseph goes from being the main villain of the previous game to an ally against the main villains of this game. But yeah, overall, if you enjoyed Far Cry 5, I'd say still try Far Cry New Dawn anyway, because it's very similar. Although Hope County looks a lot more picturesque and vibrant with the colours in this game compared to Far Cry 5. That's one thing I will give it. But yeah, overall, I still prefer Far Cry 5 to New Dawn, but New Dawn wasn't a bad game. It was fairly okay. So if you guys have enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and until we meet again, farewell.